Today I'm going to tell you a secret about something that happened between my son-in-law and me that affected my whole family, so please don't judge me and watch the full video to understand. I never thought my life would take such an unexpected turn at 52 years old. I always considered myself a sensible woman, a loving mother, and an understanding mother-in-law. But fate had other plans for me, plans that tested my principles and unleashed a storm of emotions I never thought possible to experience. It all began 6 months ago when my daughter Sarah, 28, came to visit me with tears in her eyes. Her marriage to Jack, 32, was going through a crisis. At first, I thought it would be the typical couple problems that arise after a few years of living together. But as Sarah opened up, I realized the issue was more complicated. "Mom, I can't take it anymore," Sarah sobbed as I served her a cup of tea in the kitchen. "Jack has this habit. He's so noisy at night that I can barely sleep." I frowned, confused. "Noisy habit? What do you mean, honey?" Sarah lowered her voice, as if afraid someone else might hear her. "It's hard to explain. He makes these strange sounds, like growls or moans. Sometimes he even screams. And the worst part is he doesn't even realize it." My mind started spinning, imagining all sorts of scenarios. Could it be some kind of sleep disorder or something more sinister? "Have you talked to him about it?" I asked, trying to stay calm for my daughter's sake. "I've tried, Mom, but every time I bring it up, he gets defensive. He says he doesn't know what I'm talking about, that it must be my imagination." Sarah wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I'm starting to think I'm going crazy. At that moment, my maternal instinct kicked in. I couldn't bear to see my daughter suffering like this. I promised her I would do everything I could to help, although at that moment, I had no idea how. In the following weeks, I dedicated myself to researching sleep disorders and relationship problems. I called Sarah every day to see how she was doing, gave her advice on communication, and suggested they seek professional help. I even offered to talk to Jack, but Sarah asked me not to, fearing it would only make things worse. One day, I decided to invite them over for dinner. I wanted to observe their couple dynamics with my own eyes, see if I could detect something my daughter might have overlooked. The dinner went normally, with pleasant conversation and occasional laughter. Jack seemed the same as always, kind, attentive, and affectionate with Sarah. Nothing in his behavior suggested there was anything strange about him, but when they said goodbye and I saw them drive away in their car, I noticed something that intrigued me. Jack looked at Sarah in a different way. It wasn't the look of a loving husband, but something more intense, almost predatory. A shiver ran down my spine, and at that moment I knew I had to get to the bottom of this mystery. The following weeks, I became a sort of amateur detective. I invited the couple more frequently, observed every gesture, every look, every unspoken word between them. I even got to the point of passing by their house casually at different times of the day, hoping to hear something revealing. It was during one of these surprise visits that everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I decided to bring them a pie I had baked. I rang the doorbell several times, but no one answered. I was about to leave when I heard a noise coming from inside the house. Without thinking twice, I used the emergency key Sarah had given me years ago and entered. The house was quiet, but I could sense a presence. I cautiously advanced down the hallway until I reached the half-open door of the study, and there was Jack, alone, sitting in front of the computer with headphones on. His eyes were closed, his face contorted in an expression I couldn't decipher, and then I heard it. The growls, the moans, exactly as Sarah had described them. My heart raced. What was going on? Was this what tormented my daughter's nights? I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I didn't realize Jack had opened his eyes and was staring at me. "Linda," he said, taking off his headphones. His voice sounded hoarse, different. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." I stammered an apology, explaining about the pie and the open door, but Jack didn't seem upset. On the contrary, an enigmatic smile appeared on his lips. "Don't worry, mother-in-law," he said, emphasizing the last word in a way that made me shudder. "In fact, I'm glad you came. There's something I'd like to talk to you about." He stood up and approached me. I could feel the heat emanating from his body, his cologne mixing with a more primitive, more animal scent. My instinct told me to run, but my feet seemed glued to the floor. "I know Sarah has told you about our problems," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But there are things she doesn't understand, needs she can't satisfy. And I wonder, Linda, do you have them too? Those needs that make us feel alive? That make us growl and moan in the dark?" His hand brushed my arm, and I felt an electric shock run through my entire body. Part of me wanted to push him away, scream at him, defend my daughter's honor. But another part, one I didn't know existed, wanted to know more. "I don't know what you're talking about, Jack," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. His smile widened. "Oh, I think you do know, Linda. I see it in your eyes, in the way your body reacts to my closeness. You don't have to deny it. I can help you. I can show you a world of sensations you didn't even know existed." At that moment, we heard the sound of a car parking in front of the house. Sarah had returned. Jack quickly moved away, winking at me before leaving the study as if nothing had happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. Jack's words echoed in my mind, mixing with images that I was ashamed to admit excited me. What kind of mother was I, fantasizing about her daughter's husband? I felt dirty, guilty, but at the same time, more alive than I had felt in years. The following days were torture. Every time Sarah called me to complain about Jack, I had to bite my tongue not to scream the truth at her. But what was the truth? That her husband was a pervert trying to seduce his mother-in-law? Or that I was a desperate woman clinging to any glimpse of passion? A week after that encounter in the study, I received a text message from an unknown number. "Tonight, 11 p.m., the park near your house. Come alone." I didn't need a signature to know who it was from. I spent all day debating whether to go or not. The rational part of my brain was screaming that it was madness, that it would only bring trouble. But another part, one that grew every minute, whispered that maybe this was my last chance to feel something real, something intense. At 10:55 p.m., I found myself walking towards the park. My heart was beating so hard I feared someone might hear it. And there he was, leaning against a tree, his silhouette outlined against the moonlight. "You came," Jack said, his voice mixed with relief and excitement. "I shouldn't be here," I replied, but my feet carried me closer to him. "But you are here," he whispered, closing the distance between us. "And you know why." His lips found mine in a passionate, desperate kiss. All the accumulated tension, all the repressed desires exploded at that moment. My hands roamed his body while his explored mine with an urgency that left me breathless. "This is wrong," I gasped between kisses. "Then why does it feel so right?" he responded, his hands sliding under my blouse. What followed was a whirlwind of passion and lust. We made love right there, in the darkness of the park, with the adrenaline of danger adding an extra flavor to every caress, every moan. And yes, there were growls and sounds I never thought would come out of my throat. When it was all over and reality began to settle in, the weight of what we had done fell on me like a ton of bricks. I pulled away from Jack, trying to fix my clothes and my hair. "This can't happen again," I said. although my body yearned for his touch again. Jack looked at me with a mixture of satisfaction and challenge. We both know this is just the beginning, Linda. You can't deny what you feel, what you need. I returned home that night feeling like a stranger in my own skin. How could I look Sarah in the eye after this? How could I keep advising her on her marriage when I was the reason it was crumbling? My story isn't over yet. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you. Back to the story. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Against all odds and against all morality, my encounters with Jack continued. We would meet in discreet hotels, at my house when Sarah was working, even at their own house when my daughter was out of town on business. Each time I swore it would be the last, but every time Jack called me, I came without hesitation. Guilt was eating me up inside. I saw Sarah withering away, complaining that Jack was increasingly distant, more irritable. He barely touches me anymore, Mom, she confessed to me one day in tears. It's like he doesn't desire me anymore. Every word from my daughter was like a dagger in my heart. I wanted to confess everything, fall to my knees and beg for her forgiveness. But the fear of losing her, of losing Jack, of losing everything, kept me silent. Jack, for his part, seemed to enjoy the cat and mouse game. He delighted in creating situations where the three of us were together, giving me desire-laden looks when Sarah wasn't looking, brushing my hand, accidentally, during family dinners. It was a dangerous dance, and I knew that at any moment we could fall. One night, after a particularly intense encounter at a motel on the outskirts of the city, Jack surprised me with a proposal that left me breathless. "We should tell Sarah," he said, tracing circles on my bare back. I sat up abruptly, looking at him as if he had lost his mind. "Are you crazy? It would destroy her?" Jack shrugged, a smile playing on his lips. Or maybe not. Maybe she would understand. Maybe she would even like to join in. The idea turned my stomach and excited me at the same time, and I hated myself for it. You can't be serious. Why not? Think about it, Linda. The three of us together, no secrets, no guilt. It could be beautiful. I got up from the bed, starting to dress with trembling hands. "This has gone too far, Jack. We have to stop." He got up too, hugging me from behind. His warm breath on my neck made me shiver. "You know we can't stop. What we have is too strong, too real." I turned to face him, tears threatening to spill from my eyes. "What about Sarah? What about my daughter? Your wife?" For a moment, I saw a flash of doubt in his eyes, but it disappeared so quickly that I thought I had imagined it. "I love her, Linda, but I need you. I need this." That night, as I drove back home, I made a decision. This had to end, one way or another. I couldn't keep living this double life, destroying my daughter and myself in the process. The next day, I sent Sarah a message, asking her to come see me. I spent hours practicing in front of the mirror, rehearsing how I would tell her the truth. But when she arrived and I saw her sitting on my couch with dark circles under her eyes and a tired smile on her lips, all my words evaporated. "What's going on, Mom?" Sarah asked, worry evident in her voice. "You sounded urgent on the phone." I took her hands in mine, breathing deeply. "Honey, there's something I need to tell you. Something terrible." Just at that moment, the doorbell rang. My heart stopped when I opened the door and saw Jack standing there, an enigmatic smile on his face. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, entering without waiting for an invitation. "But I think it's time we had a conversation. The three of us." Sarah looked at us confused, her gaze jumping between Jack and me. I could see the questions forming in her eyes, the fear and uncertainty beginning to take root. What's going on?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why are you acting so strange? Jack sat down next to her on the couch, taking her hand. The gesture, which should have been comforting, only seemed to increase the tension in the room. I remained standing, unable to move, feeling as if I were on the edge of a precipice. "Love," Jack began, his voice soft but firm. "Your mother and I have something to tell you." Panic took over me. Was he really going to do it? Was he going to destroy our family at this very moment? I opened my mouth to stop him, but the words refused to come out. "These last few months have been complicated," Jack continued. "I know you've noticed changes in me, in us, and the truth is—" "Enough!" I finally shouted, surprising them both. "Sarah, honey, I'm the one who has something to tell you." My daughter's eyes filled with tears, as if she already knew what I was going to say before the words left my mouth. "Mom, please, don't." I fell to my knees in front of her, taking her hands in mine. "I'm so sorry, my love. I never wanted this to happen. Jack and I have been seeing each other behind my back," Sarah finished, her voice barely a whisper. I know. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack and I looked at each other, stunned. How could she know? You knew?" I finally managed to ask. Sarah nodded, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "I saw you, a few weeks ago, in the park. At first, I couldn't believe it. I thought I was imagining things. But then, all the pieces fit together. The secret calls, the sudden outings, the way you looked at each other when you thought I wasn't watching. Shame crushed me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to disappear, sink into the ground, and never come out again. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. You what, Mom?" Sarah interrupted, her voice taking on a tone I had never heard from her before. It was cold, cutting. "You didn't mean to hurt me while you were sleeping with my husband? While you were destroying my marriage and my trust in you?" Jack tried to intervene. "Sarah, love, it's not your mother's fault. It was me who—" "Shut up!" Sarah shouted, pushing his hand away roughly. "Don't you dare defend her! You're both guilty. You both betrayed me." She got up from the couch, moving away from us, as if our mere touch could contaminate her. "You know what's worse? I came to you, Mom, looking for help. I told you my problems, my fears, and all this time, you were the reason for them." Every word was like a dagger in my heart. I wanted to explain to her, make her understand that we never planned for this to happen, that we got carried away by emotions we couldn't control. But I knew any excuse would only sound empty and selfish. "Sarah, please," I begged, getting up to approach her. "We can talk about this. We can what, Mom?" she interrupted, her voice broken by crying and anger. "Fix it? Pretend it never happened? Or maybe you want me to join you, as Jack surely suggested at some point of madness?" I saw Jack lower his gaze, confirming Sarah's words. My stomach turned as I realized how deep we had fallen into this spiral of deceit and lust. I need to get out of here," Sarah said, heading for the door. "I can't even look at you right now." "Wait!" Jack and I shouted in unison, but it was in vain. Sarah left the house, slamming the door shut in a way that seemed to resonate throughout my being. We stood there, Jack and I, in a sepulchral silence. Everything we had built, all the lies and excuses we had told ourselves, were crumbling around us. "What now?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jack ran a hand over his face, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. "I don't know, Linda. I really don't know." The following days were hell. Sarah didn't answer our calls or messages. I found out from a mutual friend that she was staying at a hotel, refusing to return to the house she shared with Jack. I tried to visit her at work, but they denied me entry. It was as if my daughter had disappeared from my life, taking a part of my heart with her. Jack and I met several times during that period, but there was no longer any passion in our encounters. Just guilt, remorse, and a deep feeling of loss. What once seemed exciting and forbidden now felt empty and bitter. A week after the confrontation, I received a message from Sarah. "We need to talk. Come to the house tomorrow at 3 p.m. Come alone." The next day, I found myself in front of her house door, my heart pounding. When Sarah opened, I was surprised to see how much she had changed in such a short time. She looked thinner, with pronounced dark circles and an expression of determination on her face that painfully reminded me of myself when I was younger. "Come in," she said dryly, leading me to the living room. We sat in silence for a few moments, the tension so thick it could almost be cut with a knife. "I've been thinking a lot," Sarah finally began. "About you two, about me, about everything that's happened." I nodded, not daring to interrupt. What you did to me," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "It's unforgivable. You destroyed my trust, my marriage, my relationship with you, Mom, and part of me wants to hate you for it, wants to scream at you, hurt you like you hurt me." Tears began to fall down my cheeks, but I made no attempt to wipe them away. I deserved this pain, this shame. "But," Sarah went on, surprising me, "another part of me understands that relationships are complicated, that sometimes people make mistakes, no matter how terrible they are." "Sarah," I managed to say between sobs, "I'm so sorry. I would give anything to go back and—" "No," she interrupted, raising a hand. "I don't want apologies now. What I want is the truth, the whole truth. And then I want you to listen to me." For the next few hours, Jack, who arrived shortly after at Sarah's request, and I confessed everything. Every encounter, every lie, every moment of weakness. Sarah listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When we finished, exhausted and emotionally drained, Sarah took a deep breath. "Okay," she said, "now it's my turn. I've decided that I'm not going to let this destroy me. I'm not going to be the victim in this story. I'm going to divorce you, Jack." Jack nodded, accepting her decision without protest. "And you, Mom," she continued, turning to me, "I need time. A lot of time. I can't forgive you now, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to do it completely. But you're my mother, and despite everything, I love you." Tears started flowing from my eyes again, this time of relief and gratitude. "Oh, Sarah." "But," she added, her voice firm, "if we're ever going to rebuild our relationship, I need you to stay away from Jack. Completely. No contact, no secret meetings, nothing. Do you understand?" I looked at Jack, seeing in his eyes the same resignation I felt in my heart. What we had had, intense as it was, wasn't worth losing my daughter. I nodded, turning to Sarah. "I understand. I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes to get you back, honey." Sarah stood up, indicating that the conversation was over. "Good. Now, I need you both to leave. I have a lot to think about and decisions to make." We got up in silence, heading for the door. Before leaving, I turned one last time to my daughter. "I love you, Sarah. Always." For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the girl who used to run into my arms seeking comfort, but it disappeared quickly, replaced by the strong and hurt woman she had become. "I know, Mom," she replied softly. "I love you too, but now I need to love myself more." With those words, she closed the door, leaving Jack and me on the porch, facing the consequences of our actions. As we walked in separate directions, I felt a mixture of pain and hope. I had lost so much, had caused so much damage, but Sarah's words gave me a ray of light, a possibility of redemption. The road ahead would be long and difficult. I would have to face my own demons, my desires and my weaknesses. I would have to learn to live with guilt and remorse. But for the first time in months, I felt I could breathe freely. I looked up at the sky, promising myself and Sarah that I would do everything possible to be worthy of her love and forgiveness. And although the future was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. This experience had changed me forever, and it was time to start a new chapter in my life, one of honesty, growth, and, hopefully, redemption.